As the Americans advanced towards their initial objectives, the situation remained calm. No perceivable sign of enemy soldiers was evident. The scout jeep had arrived at the convoy ambush site without incident, while the balance of Company B had reached the crest of Hill 146 and began to spread out into a standard skirmish formation. However, the story for the Germans was different. Not only had the sniper team detected movement along the road, they were now joined by a 3-man scout team that would serve as localized fire support and also as information runners between this forward position and the command post. These men readied themselves to draw first blood. At 10:23 hours, the Battle of Albeit finally commenced in earnest. The German sniper atop Point Amos engaged the scout jeep as it began to move out from behind the burning convoy. Though unharmed, the crew was momentarily shocked by the suddenness of this stealthy attack and began a hasty retreat. The sniper immediately turned his attention on those members of 3rd Platoon that were now exposed along the roadway with their backs to the impenetrable bocage. As the platoon began to return fire into the general vicinity of the sniper rounds, 3 GIs were struck in quick succession and collapsed to the ground. The American advance towards Point Amos was already proving problematic. In simultaneous fashion, combat began within the Vale itself. Detecting enemy soldiers casually cresting the southern ridge of Hill 146, the MG-42 machine gun crew, located beneath the stone footbridge, could not resist the temptation to engage exposed infantry. They elected to break concealment and rouse their lethal rapid-firing weapon. Lieutenant Eckel observed this action from his command post.
Im Moment klingelten die ersten Schüsse. Ich wusste sofort, dass die Maschinengewehrmannschaft, aufgestellt innerhalb des Bewässerungsabzugsgrabens.
At the moment the first shots rang out, I immediately knew the machine gun crew, stationed within the irrigation ditch, had blown their cover. The roar of an MG-42 is very distinct. I could only hope that the crew managed to strike its initial targets because, through my field glasses, it was plain to see that the enemy force, deploying before us, was no small affair. And they own the high ground.
Back at Point Amos, the sniper team was engaging targets with impunity. Casualties were mounting. Although the Americans were returning a heavy volley of fire towards the bluff, the Germans were dug in and, for the moment, unaffected. In essence, a lone sniper team had pinned the whole of 3rd Platoon. In the Vale, events were taking a swift and dramatic turn for the worse for the German MG crew. Despite the volume of fire coming from their position, their gambit had failed. In very short order, it was they who had become the prey.
While the main body of Company B was still in the process of deploying atop Hill 146, the first shots from an MG-42 echoed throughout the Vale. Bullets whistled overhead that were obviously meant for us. I was quite surprised by this action, because my men and I were still at range from the Vale floor, at a highly elevated position, and within a wooded area that served as cover. This made no sense. The machine gun's tracer rounds not only betrayed its exact position beneath a stone bridge, it also served as confirmation that the Germans in question were, indeed, occupying the Vale. My men did not falter nor hesitate. They took to the ground and quickly began pouring fire onto the machine gun's location.
The bridge was now of little value as effective cover for the German MG crew, given the defilade of rifle shot emanating from Hill 146. The suppressive value of this firestorm, combined with the sudden lack of quality targets, prompted the crew to abandon their foxholes and attempt to relocate to a prepared fallback position. Witnessing their plight from the west bluff, the previously concealed 2nd Heavy Machine Gun, an MG-34, opted to reveal its presence and began to spray Hill 146 with suppressive fire of its own in an attempt to cover the other crew's frantic move. This gun was initially more successful in hitting home with its rounds. As if sharing the very same thoughts of concern for their comrades, the easternmost Stug leaped into action. The commander was Lieutenant Rudolf Spitzer.
Im Moment begann der Kampf, mein Hauptkanonier und ich waren außerhalb des Fahrzeugs.
At the moment the battle began, my main gunner and I were outside the vehicle scanning the veil from within the barn in which we had concealed our stoop. We observed the isolated machine gun crew's dilemma, looked at one another, and without a single word being spoken, jumped aboard our armored behemoth and pulled out onto open ground facing Hill 146. We let loose with a single high explosive round, which impacted on the southern ridge.
The covering fire from both the MG-34 and the Stug resulted in multiple U.S. casualties and the appearance of the first medics on the battlefield. However, these efforts were not enough to suppress the mass volley of gunfire that the now exposed MG crew had aroused. As they raced for a set of foxholes located within the crop fields east of the irrigation ditch, 3 members of the team fell victim to the rain of GI lead. This left only half the crew to carry the machine gun and to carry on the fight. The situation along Route D54 near Point Amos, albeit fully engaged and already becoming costly for the Americans, was a predetermined outcome from the start. The sheer firepower being leveled at the sniper team from the road was immense. Although the sharpshooting German managed to fell one of the platoon's 3 automatic riflemen, this would be his last statement. At that moment, the armed scout jeep rolled into an enfilade position on the Germans' left flank, momentarily forcing them into cover. As the sniper arose to acquire yet another target, 1st Squad's NCO let loose with a burst of fire from the roadway with his Thompson submachine gun, thereby ending this pesky German's shooting spree. Back at the farmstead, Eckel directed the stragglers to begin deploying the mortar tubes for action, despite exposing them to potential long-range fire.
Zu sein, dass diese Männer mit der Operation der amerikanischen Mörser fremd waren, wusste ich, dass es mehrere Minuten sein würde.
Being that these men were unfamiliar with the operation of the American mortars, I knew it would be several minutes before they were capable of sending the first shells down range. Therefore, once it was apparent we were faced with a substantial enemy contingent on Hill 146, I signaled the entire group to deploy their weapons.
Sensing an opportunity to advance and secure Point Amos, 3rd Platoon began to position itself for a hill assault. Moments later, while bravely defending his ground with a short-range MP-40 submachine gun, the sniper team's spotter ultimately met his own fate under a torrent of covering fire. Meanwhile, the nearby German scout team remained hidden within their foxholes, awaiting the inevitable charge. At this same time, the remnants of the displaced MG-42 machine gun crew managed to reach the foxholes of the fallback position and redeployed the tripod and gun with expert efficiency under fire. Within seconds, the gunner was renewing his attack by placing a high volume of rounds onto the ridge, resulting in additional U.S. casualties. His foray was short-lived, however. Only moments later, he, his ammo bearer, and the auxiliary gunner were summarily dispatched. The destruction of the MG crew was complete. Their lethal weapon fell silent. Upon witnessing the demise of their fellow soldiers, the Stug crew slowly backed their vehicle out of view of the Americans on Hill 146. They would bide their time. With the elimination of the MG-42 amidst the en-masse crop fields, as well as the sudden disengagement of the German assault gun, the 2 most immediate threats within the Vale subside. Subsequently, the Americans on Hill 146 turned their full attention to the West Bluff and the last remaining heavy machine gun in Kampfgruppe Eckel's arsenal. By revealing their presence, the MG-34 crew is now reaping the same whirlwind of GI lead as their predecessor. In spite of this, the German gunner desperately attempts to maintain a constant rate of fire on the multitude of enemy soldiers arrayed along the southern ridge, but to no avail. It's not long before one of the crewmen falls victim to the withering barrage of rifle shot. With the advent of their first casualty, the MG team promptly packs up their gear and begin to extract themselves from an unfavorable circumstance, only to become pinned by a mass volley of small arms fire within seconds of leaving their foxholes. Recognizing that the only other known threat within the Vale has now taken to foot, Captain Dorn immediately signals 2nd Platoon to prepare for a field crossing.
Given the terrain features of the battlefield, defeating a hidden enemy force of unknown size required that we attempt to control all of the available high ground overlooking the Vale. It was 2nd Platoon's job to transition down the southern face of Hill 146 and, temporarily, take cover in the irrigation ditch. From there, they would be tasked with assaulting and securing the West Bluff, which I pre-designated as Point Andy. I also directed a .30 caliber machine gun crew to reposition their weapon on the right flank, in order to cover this general advance.
Over on Route D54, the eradication of the German sniper team has resulted in an unrequited silence of enemy activity at that location. However, this does not deter 3rd Platoon from continuing to pepper Point Amos with grazing fire whilst they finish deploying for their hill assault. Unbeknownst to them, a stray round incapacitates one of the heretofore concealed German scouts as he peeks out from the confines of his foxhole. Consequently, the 2 remaining scouts either recognize the futility of their continued presence on the East Bluff or simply just panic. Regardless of their motivation, these comrades in arms summon the courage to break cover and leap from their respective entrenchments. Moments later, both men are engaged in a desperate dash for safety down the reverse slope of Point Amos in an attempt to remove themselves from the line of fire. A swarm of American bullets chase the pair over the crest of the hill. Point Amos has been abandoned. Battle for control of the Vale is now at hand.
Sie sehen Märchen des virtuellen Kampfs auf seines der Geschichte des International zu.